So here is what we are working with. It is a Tekonsha brand. Be sure to tell me how badly I pronounced that down in there in the comment section below. So it is part number 118845. Again, I ordered this from eTrailer.com. This is supposed to be specific to the Bolt EUV, so everything should just be plug and play. And the whole idea of a kit like this is to basically make it so that you're not relying on the vehicle's existing wiring, circuits, fuse protection, everything like that to power the lights on a trailer. With something like the Bolt EUV, or just about any new vehicle for that matter that uses primarily LED lighting, that's going to be really important because those LED light circuits are not designed for the kind of current that you would experience on a traditional incandescent bulb, like you might find in a lot of different trailers. So the whole point of this is it allows you to run the lights off of a different lighting circuit, but have it be triggered by the existing vehicle lighting circuit. It should all just be plug and play, no cutting or wiring needed, just plug stuff in, run the new wires as needed, and then we'll have to run a power wire there from the battery itself. So let's have a look here, see what comes in the box. There we have it. So what it looks like we have here, just some basic wiring accessories, cable ties. Looks like there's a fuse holder in there to be able to hook up to the battery. Got quite a long length of wiring there, and that's pretty thick gauge wire. Maybe 6 gauge, maybe 8 gauge, I'm not really sure. Pretty thick though. We've got all of the magic over here. This looks like a controller, and then all of the different plugs and everything that should plug into the vehicle's existing wiring. Looks like there might be some diodes or fuses built in there as well, just so that you don't mess anything up with the existing wiring. And then there's the 4-pin plug itself. Maybe I should have mentioned that this is for 4-pin, just for trailer lighting. It is not for trailer brakes. And then, of course, printed instructions. So let's get all this stuff on the car. So the first step in the instructions here is basically, like I said, pull everything out of the trunk so that you've got good access to the bottom of the trunk. And then we're also going to need to pull out the bottom floor covering in there, as it calls it in the instructions. And then we'll also need to pull this trim panel over here off, at least a little bit. So we've got a cargo hook over there held in with a 10mm head bolt, and then also another cargo net hook right here that I think is held in. It might just screw in, but either way, we've got to pull those two out so that we can pull this trim panel here out a little bit, because there's a wiring harness that we need to get to behind this panel. So it does just screw in there. Just comes out like a regular screw. So before we can pull that panel off the side there, we need to pull this panel off the back. Normally these just kind of clip in there with some plastic clips, so we should be able to either pull it straight out that way or straight up. Let me experiment with that a little bit and see how it comes out of there. So pull straight up. It's also captured in here by the weather stripping a little bit, so we might have to pull the weather stripping, or we might be able to sneak it out past it. There we go. So we can kind of see here, it doesn't exactly pull straight up because it has these these metal clips here that pull and clip it in towards the back of the car. And then you have these ones up here at the top that pull straight up. So you have to kind of pull the bottom piece out towards the front of the car, and then you can pull the top piece straight up. So now we should be able to pull this panel that way. Let's see. We've got to find a clip. There's one right there. We should be able to pop those out. And so you just kind of have to go around here and find out where each of the clips are at, and just kind of pop them out. Let's see. So it looks like it's actually going to be better to pull this top panel out first, because the bottom panel actually tucks up behind the top panel. So there's going to be a screw back behind that cover back there. I need to pull that out first. So it looks like that screw has a 7mm head. Once we get that out of there, we should be able to fold that panel out of the way. Oops, and drop that into oblivion. I'll get that later. We're not going to be able to pull this panel all the way up because it has the seat belt going through it, but we should be able to at least get it somewhat out of the way. Like that. I've gone handheld here because we're going to begin here a little bit tight. So unfortunately, I can't pull this entire panel out because it interfaces with the side of the seat right here. I could pull it out, of course, but I'd have to pull this side of the seat out, and it's not really worth it because we don't have to. It's just going to be a little tight. Thankfully, the wiring harness that we need to get to is right here in the back, and it is this one right here. So if we look at it from kind of the side of the vehicle here, you can kind of get an idea. The brake light, or the tail light I should say, is over there to the left of the screen. This is the driver's side of the vehicle. If you basically just go straight in from the tail light there, the harness is right there, the one with the black and the purple with white wire. So what we have to do over here on the trailer harness, these plugs here need to go in line with that connector on the car. It says it's the one with the brown wire on it. So we just need to disconnect that connector in the car, plug this one in line with it, and then we're good to go. All right, so I've got that plugged in there. As I've mentioned before, these panels, like these plastics, can be moved a little bit. So even though we can't get it disconnected easily from back here, we can get enough movement here to be able to get in there and plug in the wiring as we need to. All right, so I've got that wiring hooked up, that harness installed in there. I just kind of want to just show you what it looks like. It's right there. So we've got one part plugged into the vehicle's wiring harness, then the other part goes into the trailer harness, and then back out to the vehicle. I believe that's for the parking lights, because that's where the park light is at. And then we've got the brown wire coming out there. I will wire tie that in so that it's not flopping around in there. The next step that they have is to choose a location to mount the magic black box. And I think I'm going to mount mine right there. It's out of the way, and once we put this trim panel back in there, I'm pretty sure it's not going to hit. So I just need to enlarge that hole on the black box a little bit. And then I think probably what I'll do, they want you to ground it as well, and the wire to do that is really short. And so I think I will find a nut that fits that stud sticking out there, just clean it up a little bit, and I'll just use that as the ground since it's going right to the vehicle body. Inside the car, I put you there because a lot of the work is going to be going on this back panel here now. So I've got everything buttoned up, I think, inside the driver's side rear fender well over here. Now we need to basically run some of this wiring to the outside of the vehicle. So the yellow and green wires here basically go out to the exterior lights on either side of the car. I don't remember which one is which, but we'll go over that once we get there. So basically this is going to be our brake light and turn signal input to the magic black box there. So we do need to get underneath the car back to where these rear lights are, just so we can plug these in line with the lighting back here. Now the way that they have you getting these wires outside the car is to basically go through these cutouts under here, and then there's some vents, which I'll put up a picture of from the outside, which I took with the bumper cover off when I was doing the trailer hitch install. They're just basically one-way vents that allow positive pressure from inside the car to be vented outside the car, so that you're not trying to inflate the car every time you turn on the air conditioning or the heater or whatever. And so because there's kind of a sharp edge along the bottom here, I think I'm going to find some vacuum hose and just split it open and run it over here so that these wires, when they go through, they're not rubbing on the sharp edge there. All right, I'm not sure how well you can see that, but I just did split some rubber hose, like I think it was a fuel hose, but vacuum line will work just as well too. It's just, this is what I had available. So I just split it along one side, slipped it over that rough edge, that sharp edge I should say, just so that when the wires are sitting on there, they're not going to get rubbed through and end up being a short circuit. And so now we've got to take these wires and work them through the vents that are on the inside here. It looks like a little bit of a tight fit, but it shouldn't be too big of a deal. All right, so I got those plugs worked through there. Unfortunately, there's not much for me to show you. I can barely see what I'm doing myself, so it's hard for me to really show you what I'm doing. But it looks like the rest of this is going to be under the car. So I'm going to get this thing jacked up in the air, and then we'll get under there and have a look. All right, here we are back underneath the car, facing towards the back of the vehicle. You can see the bottom of the trailer hitch there. So you can see right here where our wiring has started to drop through from the inside. So we've got the yellow and the green wires there. But anyway, we need to make it over to where our lighting is at, which is over here at each of the corners of the vehicle. It's kind of up here at the top. This would have probably been easier to do with the bumper off of the car. In retrospect, I should have done that. So if we look up there, if I can get in the right angle, that wiring right there is what we're going to. So I need to get up there, get that disconnected, and then we need to put this connector in line with that. So you just disconnect one side, plug it into whichever side it fits here on the harness, plug the other side into either the lighting or whatever. It only goes in one way. One's a male end there, one's a female end. So it only goes one way. Right, so here's what it looks like with everything installed on there. It's going to be a little bit hard to see, but we're over on the passenger side now just because there's a little bit more room over here. I'm going to try to fit my finger up here. So this is the vehicle harness right here. You can see the blue, black, white going into the vehicle's plug. That used to be plugged in right up there where it goes into the light, which you can just kind of barely see. The wiring goes up into the light right there. And then this is the passenger side brake light and turn signal. So this is the wiring that's coming out of the trailer wiring right here. The green wire goes into that connector there, over to that connector there, and it just takes the signal for the light there and sends it out on the green wire as well, going into the trailer wiring harness. So it's just an inline connector there. We've got it all connected up. I did zip tie the vehicle's connector there just so it's not flopping around, and then the trailer wiring goes back on top of the bumper and everything there, back into the vehicle. It's the same thing over on the driver's side, just a little bit harder to see. I'm just showing it to you over here. So I think we're all done underneath the vehicle. Let's head back inside. I'm switching to voiceover here because, wouldn't you know it, you need to have charged batteries in your wireless microphone in order for it to record audio. Go figure. So anyway, the next step in the process here is to run a power wire from the battery at the front of the vehicle to the magic box at the back of the vehicle for the trailer wiring. Now, for me personally, I prefer to run wiring through the interior of the vehicle versus the exterior just because it's generally a less harsh environment inside the vehicle versus outside. So in order to do that and have it look clean and professional, I'm going to be removing some trim pieces and running the wiring behind that trim. To start off, we're going to remove the rear seat bottom cushion, which is not that difficult. It's actually quite easy. There's a couple of latches on either side at the front bottom side of the rear seat cushion. You just have to push the little plastic clip on those latches. You pull the front of the seat up, and then you pull the whole seat forward. We'll see that in the video here now. So now back at the back of the vehicle again, we just need to run the wiring behind the panel there and then run it forward into the back seat area.
"2,000 years later."
Now that that struggle is over, we're going to run the wiring underneath basically where the door sills are and where the front seat belts are, all the way up to the front of the vehicle. We're going to be kind of going along this path here, along the side of the seat, down underneath the door sill, and then up to the front of the vehicle. Unfortunately, there's no way for me to really do that without being in the way of the camera, so I will do that off camera and we will be back shortly. So we've got the plastic trim at the base of the seat off now. You can see it kind of up in the center of the camera view. So the plan is to just run the power wire along the existing wiring harness here, and we're just going to zip tie it to the existing wiring. That way we know it's going to be out of harm's way. To get it past the B-pillar where the seatbelt is, I'm just going to sort of fish it through. Might be able to use some pliers on the other side to just grab a hold of it and pull that wiring through. It's better to do that than to try to take the panel off, in my opinion. So I've skipped ahead here just a little bit, but you can see now I've got the wiring run through and it's sticking out there at the base of the dash. But I will show you how I did that. It's actually quite easy and you don't even have to remove all the panels. So you can actually get the wiring through there just by sort of slipping it underneath the edge of the panel. If you kind of push down on the carpet a little bit and you can just sort of roll the wire up underneath there, and you can do it all the way along up to the bottom of the dash. Right here we are in the front compartment of the Bolt EUV. So where we're looking to get that wiring run to is right over here where the 12-volt battery is. And we specifically, well, we would normally be trying to get to this part right here. But as you can see, GM clearly does not want us to get to this point because they've actually put a metal plate over the top of the positive battery terminal, which is not really a big deal because we can just go here under the fuse block cover and go right to this stud down here. This is basically a wire coming straight from the battery positive. You can see it coming right along there and straight up into there. That's a pretty high amperage wire there. It'll work perfectly fine to supply power for what we need for trailer lighting. So what I'll end up doing is we'll just take the nut off of the stud there and we'll just attach our wire right there. We won't mess with the battery at all. That actually works out pretty well. Now, as far as getting through the firewall, I think our best choice is going to be right under here. So it's a little bit tricky to see back there, but if you look kind of in the back where that wire and harness is going, you'll see kind of a black circle there. That's a grommet on the firewall where wiring is already passing through. And so I think we're going to aim for that to be able to pass our wire through because it's right over here on the driver's side, right over next to the fuse block and the battery. It's just in the right spot. So I'm going to look on the interior of the vehicle just to make sure I can get good access to that. That actually works out perfectly. You can see that grommet there right in the center of your picture. And that right there is our wire that's coming up. So this is the steering column, that's the brake pedal. That grommet is actually really nice and easy to get access to from the inside. So I'm just going to cut a small, I do sort of like a small X pattern. That gives us a little bit of a way to get the wire through without really making a hole per se. And then I'll just get it pushed through there. If you know any better ways to get a wire through a grommet, please feel free to leave them down there in the comment section. All right, I think you can just barely see back there. We have the wire pushed through the grommet. That's always my least favorite part of just about any wiring job where it has to go through the firewall. And this time was no different. So I'm gonna get some pliers, grab that and pull the wire on through. So we're back to voiceover mode here. I honestly have no idea what I'm saying right here, but as you can see, we've got the wire pulled through the firewall, and it's way too long. This is the entire spool of wire that was sent with the kit, and obviously we don't need all of that for such a short car like the Bolt. So the idea here is we're just going to trim off whatever wire we don't need, and then we have that fuse holder that I need to splice onto here. Now, when we're going to be installing the wiring here and getting it under the hood, we kind of want to tuck things in, make it look nice and neat, and make sure that the wiring isn't going to rub or chafe on anything. Even though it is, fused, so it's not going to burn the car down, you still don't want to have it chafe through on any pieces of metal or anything, because then you'll blow the fuse and have no trailer lights. So just take a little bit of time and care to check the wire routing under the hood and make sure that everything looks good. So I'm sure I was saying something super insightful here, but again, no idea what I was saying. But anyway, we're going to cut the wire short and then put in that fuse holder, but make sure when you cut the wire that you leave enough room and enough slack to be able to route the wire properly. You want it to be able to sort of set down to the side of the battery and then have a nice gentle curve up to the stud on the fuse block. With the way they ship this fuse holder, it kind of looks like somebody's attempted an unlimited power device. But all you have to do is just cut the wire in the middle, and then strip either side. And then you'll just crimp on some connectors and make it work. So the kit ships with these connectors. I'm not a fan of those because they don't seal. I prefer to use this style here, which is still a crimp connector, but it has heat shrink on either side. And it allows you to seal up the connection, and that's really useful, especially under the hood, because it gets wet under there. There's potential for corrosion. So I would prefer to use these. That's what I'm going to use on this setup. So unfortunately, I don't have any crimp and seal ring terminals. I only have what came in the kit. So instead, I'm going to pull the plastic off of this one, and we're going to turn it into a heat shrink one. Okay, so I have a piece of heat shrink tubing here. We're just going to slide that over the wire. Make sure we don't get those bare strands caught up in there. So we just slide it onto the wire first. Common mistake is to forget to put that on there, and then you crimp your fitting on there or your connector on there, and you can't get your heat shrink on. So again, we're straightening out the wiring, giving it a little twist to make it easier to put into the connector. We've got the bare connector here. We'll just slide that on and then crimp it on. And this way we can seal up the connection. With that other one with the plastic on there, there's no way to really seal it up. And then just make sure it's good and tight. Slide the heat shrink tubing back up. I chose a piece of heat shrink tubing that was just a little bit small, so it's a little bit of a tight squeeze. There we go. That should be good. And then here I'm just using a heat gun to shrink down the shrink tubing. There's nothing special about this. It's just like a really hot hair dryer. So next up, we're going to connect our power wire up to the fuse block. Now, most people are going to tell you to disconnect the negative battery terminal because you're working with a live circuit. In my case, I'm not going to. I'm just going to be very careful not to touch metal. We're just going to be very careful about taking the nut off the stud there. And we're not going to disconnect power or anything. There's the nut off. We just need to connect our power wire onto the stud there. Now I do have the fuse removed from the fuse holder right now so that we're not actually completing the circuit. I'm bending the wire just a little bit to get a better angle since the wire sort of has to point down. So there's the nut on finger tight, and again I did sort of bend that wire down a little bit just so that it fits the contour a little bit better. We will of course tighten that nut back down to factory specification. And there we go, power wire is hooked up. Alright, we've gotten things pretty much buttoned up under the hood here, but just make sure, one quick note, just make sure that you put in the fuse, because as we see here, it ships with no fuse in it. The video is getting pretty long here, so we're just going to kind of speed through this. But I'm just going through and checking to make sure after installing everything that the original vehicle lighting is still working. Now I'm just using a test light to test the actual trailer lighting itself. There's basically one bare pin there for ground. You just hook your ground for your test light up to that, and then there's 3 other pins. One for the parking lamps, one for the left turn, and one for the right turn signal. There's no separate pin for the brake lights because it just lights up the left and right turn signals. There isn't really that much to see here during the reassembly, so I'm just going to kind of speed through it. As much as I hate the phrase, in this case it's kind of reassembly is sort of the same as disassembly. So if you have any questions about how things came apart, my best suggestion would be to go back and watch the part of the video where we were taking it apart, and that should give you an idea of how it goes back together. The wiring for the trailer lights is always going to be inside the vehicle here, and when you need to use it, you're just basically supposed to pull it out and put it behind the car. So, but when you're not using it, it's going to be inside the car. So make sure before you put all of the stuff back into the back of the car that you keep this up out of the way so that you actually can get access to it when you need to use it. So I'm just going to put it over the back of the bumper. And there we have it, installing a trailer light wiring harness on a 2022 Chevy Bolt EUV. Not an easy job for sure, but not tremendously difficult either. I would say that this is probably more difficult than installing the hitch itself, but again, you know, if you've installed, you know, speakers or an amplifier, or, you know, done some stereo work on a car in the past, you've probably done most of this same work before. So if you're able to do that successfully and do a clean job and your car didn't catch on fire afterwards, you could probably do this just the same. If you have any questions or comments about anything you saw in the process with this installation, definitely leave it down there in the comment section below. Otherwise, thanks for watching.